Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to another HRO Today educational podcast. I'm Elliot Clark, the CEO of HRO Today. We publish HRO Today Magazine, HRO Today EMEA Magazine, and HRO Today APAC Magazine, as well as hold the HRO Today forums held around the world. Today, in this educational podcast, we're going to talk about candidate care. Now, you all have been talking for quite a while in HR Today and in other media platforms about candidate experience. But experience is only an outcome. You really have to think about candidate care. How do you feel and how does the potential employee feel that they are being treated, cared for, respected, and that all results in an experience. I'm thrilled today that we're joined by Pip Eastman. Pip Eastman is the Managing Director of APAC Solutions for Korn Ferry RPO. And Korn Ferry, as you all know, is one of the leading providers of HR services, technology, and consulting. Their RPO group is actually one of the most highly rated on our HR Today Baker's Dozen customer satisfaction ratings. They are widely respected and offer an incredibly broad array of services and solutions available to their clients. Pip has a career that started actually with degrees in both marketing and management and industrial relations. Before she was in the HR industry, she actually worked in brand management in the fast-moving consumer goods industry and has worked for Korn Ferry for many years, first as the Vice President of RPO and projects for Australia and New Zealand, and was responsible for growth and operations for many significant RPO programs, and now is the head of performance and growth for the entire APAC business. Pip has a long experience both in solution design and in working with clients to develop their solutions with respect to areas like employment branding, operational excellence, and now, of course, importantly, candidate care. Welcome to the podcast, Pip.
Thanks, Elliot. Nice to have the opportunity to chat to you today.
So give us just a quick, maybe 30-second overview of the Korn Ferry RPO operation, and then we'll go into sort of how the candidate care piece plays into it. I have a couple of questions specifically.
Sure. So the Korn Ferry RPO business is a global business. We've been operating in this space for close to 2 decades. Across the APAC region, we're a pioneer in RPO in Australia and New Zealand, and really over the last sort of 5 to 10 years have broadened out that base across the Asia region. And we operate in all of the large markets in Asia, in India and China. We have a large domestic business across many of the Southeast Asian countries and truly have programs of work that are delivering for our clients globally, regionally across business and also locally to some of the domestic markets as well within the region. And certainly in the time that I've been working with Korn Ferry, which is close to 10 years now, it's been a real change in the way that we operate and the way that talent acquisition is supported with our clients and the type of RPO programs. It's very different to what we first started doing to what we do today with clients and how we support them with their talent acquisition functions.
Yeah, and I'm thrilled that you're joining us because in the midst of some slowdowns as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, we expect that just prior to and probably after, and we're starting to see some opening up in the Asian market. Coming from APAC, that is an area where you're recruiting across many, many different cultures, and there has been intense competition for talent. Everyone knows that. So I know Korn Ferry has studied this topic of candidate care and also the use of so-called artificial intelligence. I don't love that term, but the artificial intelligence chatbots. Now, one hardly thinks of visiting an ATM as a personal experience, but these new chatbots can really enhance the candidate experience and personalize interactions. And of particular note is their ability to process and update thousands of candidates. So, given this recent global pandemic and we have soaring unemployment around the world, how important is it to be able to use automation when you're bringing people back to work? And how can the features and technology improve the recruiting outcomes for companies that use them?
Yeah, I think the current economic climate with COVID-19 has really flipped things on its head. So from a talent acquisition perspective, you've got some industries that are slowing down and their requisition volume is dramatically decreasing. And then conversely, you've got some industries where the volume of recruitment that they're doing and the speed in which they need to do it is really important to be able to respond to the current circumstances. I think the ability to scale up and down has always been an advantage to organisations. And when you think about TA, experience and efficiency has always been things that have been driving the talent acquisition function. However, when we think about it in today's terms, I think readiness and agility are really key considerations, and technology plays a key role in being able to create the efficiency and the experience, but also to be ready and to be agile about how we respond. So when we think about some of the supply and demand in the market, utilising AI technology and particularly chatbots, as you've mentioned, is a real key to being able to manage high volume of candidates and also high volume of applications and keep a very high touch candidate experience throughout the process. So the chatbots really, when they're built into the process, they can shepherd a candidate through the entire process in quite a conversational way and actually quite a high touch way. So from application right through to the hiring process. They can handle questions. They're available 24/7. They can do scheduling for candidates. They can manage the sending out of questions and application questions, as well as assessments, very basic FAQs about particular roles. So all of those parts of the process can be handled by a chatbot, particularly high volume roles. And I think when we think about where the opportunity comes in for organisations is to think about utilising technology to manage those parts of the process. It's really important for candidates to have an experience and to have communication that happens 24/7. They don't have to wait for a recruiter to be available. They don't have to wait for somebody to be online because the technology works 24/7. So I think they are some of the real key considerations around utilising AI and particularly chatbots, in the environment that we're in at the moment. So if you think about some of the industries that are in the last month or so that have had to really pivot is places like supermarket and healthcare. And all of a sudden, the sheer numbers of people that they've had to hire within a very short period of time would challenge even a very robust recruitment function and talent acquisition function. So utilising some of the technology to support that, to manage that process, to answer questions and actually turn jobs around very quickly has really been quite key for some of those industry sectors recently.
And, if you think about it, in terms of candidate care, the candidate feels more robustly communicated with in many of these scenarios where we've had these kind of turndowns, that when many knowledge workers, educated workers are disgorged, they don't always go back where they came from, and it becomes a bit of a musical chairs game. I think your comments about being able to process very quickly are going to be very important. And let me get to the other thing that's on my mind is when one thinks about the term candidate care, we talked about chatbots and communication, but what is, sort of the best practices that you guys recommend to clients to think about more than just experience, but really this concept of candidate care? How important is it to provide that high level, quote unquote, of candidate care?
And I think the terms candidate care and candidate experience have been used somewhat interchangeably, and I don't think that they're completely mutually exclusive. And when you think about experience, we probably really think about that from, how does somebody feel about the process, the recruiting process, and therefore how do they feel about your company, and therefore how does it influence the decisions that they make. And, many of the elements around that are how easy is it to search for a job. So it even starts before you have any connectivity with a candidate right through the whole process. So if I think about candidate care, it's a component part of that. And it's probably more of how does an individual feel about that process and the interactions that they have. And from a candidate care perspective, we talked about this a little bit with the AI side of things, is communication is key in any part of the process and around how candidates feel. So I think the most common complaints that candidates have had over the years, and probably will continue to be the same, is that they don't hear back. So there's no communication. I applied for a job and I didn't hear back, or I contacted company, or I wanted to engage with this organisation for opportunities and I didn't know how to connect with them, or I didn't hear anything back. I had an interview and I didn't hear anything back. I didn't get any feedback. So the number one consideration in my mind around candidate care is around communication, and that comes in many formats. So that communication is, how are you communicating what the opportunity is? How clear is the job that somebody's looking to apply for? Is it a real job? Is there actually an opportunity there at the time? What does the job description look like? Is it clear what that is? What's the information about the organisation? Can somebody find that themselves and do their research, or is it available to them through a recruiter, around looking at what's the company culture, what are the benefits, what's the proposition that the company's put into them? How are they managed through the process in terms of the application? Do they have to fill out multiple pages that are hard copy versus being able to do things quickly and things that are mobile enabled? And then as somebody is progressing through that process, how is a recruiter supporting them? How are they providing advice? How are they keeping them updated? How are they supporting them with managing their offer, for example? And that process then also continues through to onboarding. So where's the support from once a job, somebody accepts a job with an organisation to before they actually join? Where's the communication? How are they supported around what's going to be like before they join? What do they need to do on the first day? Do they have everything set up for them? So I think every single part of the process and how we interact with the candidate really supports that candidate care. And communication to me is without doubt absolutely the key.
It's interesting when you say that, because basically what we're saying is that if you exercise candidate care, then the communication, the process, everything from the application, the onboarding is very carefully thought through. So it's hard to imagine a bad candidate experience if a company is exercising candidate care, whereas candidate experience, the term suggests it can be either good or it can be bad, right? Mm-hmm. You can be concerned about candidate experience and it can be simply dreadful, and unfortunately that does happen. But clearly, all great advice. I really appreciate you taking part in today's podcast. As I said to the folks who are out there in our audience listening, Korn Ferry is one of the top providers in the world for HR software services, technology, and consulting, and brand leader with a very large array of solutions available. I want to thank Pip Eastman, she's the Managing Director of APAC Solutions for Korn Ferry RPO, for giving us this insight into what, at least at Korn Ferry, they interpret as candidate care and what they recommend conceptually to their clients. This has been another HR Today educational podcast, and we hope you found the information useful, and good luck with your candidate care processes in the future. I'm Elliot Clark, the CEO of HR Today. Thank you for your time and your attention.